In 1975, a 31-year-old director walked into a negotiation with 20th Century Fox. They offered him $500,000 to direct a space movie. He said no. Instead, he asked for $150,000 and the rights to something else. Toys, action figures, lunchboxes, posters, cheap plastic junk. The studio executives looked at each other, laughed, and said sure. That decision made George Lucas $12 billion. But he didn't do it because he was a genius. He did it because he was paranoid, traumatized, and absolutely convinced the movie would fail. In the next minutes, you'll discover why George Lucas took the worst-paying directing job in Hollywood and turned it into the greatest business deal in entertainment history. How Fox executives gave away $12 billion because science fiction toys had never sold in 50 years. Why 600,000 children opened empty boxes on Christmas morning in 1977, and their parents paid $10 for the privilege. And the reason Lucas eventually sold everything to Disney for $4 billion, when he could make $10 billion more by waiting. By the end, you'll understand that the biggest fortunes don't come from vision. They come from paranoia, accidents, and owning something nobody else wants. 1973. George Lucas is 29 years old. He's made 2 films. THX 1138, a dystopian art film that bombed. American Graffiti, a coming-of-age comedy that made over $100 million. He should be celebrating. Instead, he's furious. Universal Studios owns American Graffiti. They control the sequel rights. They can make American Graffiti 2 without him. He gets nothing. Lucas didn't read the contract carefully. He was young, desperate for a green light, signed away everything to get the movie made. The film became a cultural phenomenon. Lucas got his directing fee and walked away. Universal owned his baby. That trauma changed him. He became obsessed with control. He started developing a space opera, a Flash Gordon homage mixed with samurai films and World War II dogfights. He called it the Star Wars. Nobody wanted it. He pitched Universal. They said no. Too expensive, too weird. United Artists passed. Same reason. Lucas was running out of options. His agent set up a meeting with 20th Century Fox. One executive, Alan Ladd Jr., liked American Graffiti enough to take a chance. Ladd convinced the board to greenlight Star Wars. Budget, $8.25 million. For context, that was cheap even in 1975, but Lucas had conditions. He'd been burned on American Graffiti. This time, he wanted ownership. Fox owned the movie fine, but he wanted sequel rights and merchandising rights. Everything outside the film itself. The Fox executives thought this was hilarious. Sequel rights? Sure, the movie probably won't make enough for a sequel anyway. Merchandising? Take it. Science fiction merchandise was a graveyard. Star Trek had a massive fan base. The toys flopped. Planet of the Apes made $32 million at the box office. Merchandising barely covered costs. 2001 Space Odyssey. Critically acclaimed, culturally important. No successful toys. The data was clear. Boys didn't buy space toys. They wanted G.I. Joe, sports equipment, Hot Wheels. Sci-fi was for nerds who didn't spend money. Fox executives saw merchandising rights as worthless. A lawyer wrote a memo later leaked in the 90s. Quote, Mr. Lucas is asking for merchandising rights in perpetuity. This is highly unusual, but represents no material risk to the studio. No material risk. Remember that. Lucas negotiated his fee down, from $500,000 to $150,000. He wanted the rights more than the money. Fox said yes immediately. They thought they were robbing him. One executive later admitted, "We thought George was an idiot. We saved $350,000 and gave him toys nobody would buy. We celebrated." Here's what nobody understood. Lucas didn't think Star Wars would be huge either. In interviews from 1976, while filming, he's pessimistic. He thinks it'll be a modest success at best, more likely a disaster. The special effects aren't working. The actors think the dialogue is ridiculous. The studio keeps threatening to shut down production. Lucas took merchandising rights because he wanted to own something. He told friends, Fox can have the movie. I want the posters and t-shirts. If this fails, at least I'll control my failure. It was defensive, not offensive. He wasn't betting on success. He was protecting against getting screwed again. May 25th, 1977, Star Wars opens. Fox expected it to make maybe $20 million, break even, move on. Instead, it explodes. Lines around the block, theaters adding screenings, word of mouth going nuclear. The film makes $11 million in the first week. Unheard of. By the end of summer, it's made 200 million domestic. By the end of the year, 775 million worldwide. The biggest movie in history. Fox executives are thrilled. Their $8 million gamble paid off. Lucas makes about $40 million from his directing deal and profit participation. Everyone's happy. But something else is happening. People want stuff. Kids are begging parents for Star Wars toys. There's nothing to buy. No action figures. No playsets. Nothing. Lucas had licensed merchandising to Kenner Toys earlier in the year. Kenner thought they'd sell a few thousand items. They weren't prepared. Toy manufacturing takes 9 to 12 months. Design, molds, production, shipping. Kenner started in June. They wouldn't have products until March 1978. But Christmas 1977 was 2 months after the film's release, the biggest toy buying season in history. And Kenner had nothing. Parents were rioting in toy stores, calling Kenner's headquarters. Where are the toys? Our kids are obsessed. We'll pay anything. Kenner's CEO, Bernie Loomis, had a problem. He had the license to the hottest property in the world and 0 products to sell. So he did something insane. He created the early bird certificate package, a cardboard box. Inside a certificate. The certificate promised that action figures would ship in March. No toys. No products. Just a piece of paper that said, "Trust us. We'll send you toys later. Price? $10. For cardboard and a promise." Kenner advertised it. Kids could get Star Wars figures for Christmas. Parents bought it thinking they'd get toys. On Christmas morning, 600,000 children across America opened a box. Inside, paper. Parents were furious. Consumer groups called it fraud. How do you sell nothing and call it a gift? But here's the crazy part. It worked. People kept the certificates. Kids were excited anyway because it was Star Wars. In March, Kenner shipped the figures, 4 inches tall. Luke, Leia, Darth Vader, Chewbacca. $2 each. They sold $100 million worth in 1978. Kenner's biggest year in company history. The early bird certificate became a collector's item. Today, an unopened one sells for $200 to $500. The most valuable nothing ever sold. Lucas got his cut. 100%. He made more from toys in 1978 than he made directing the movie, and it didn't stop. 1979, more toys. 1980, The Empire Strikes Back released. Lucas funded it himself, $33 million. He used merchandising money. Why? He didn't want Fox controlling the sequel. Fox wanted to fund Empire. Lucas said no. I'll pay for it. You can distribute it. Fox executives thought he was insane. Why risk your own money? Because he'd learned. Control is everything. Fox distributed Empire, made money from that. But Lucas owned the film. All profit after distribution fees went to him. Same with Return of the Jedi in 1983. Lucas funded it, owned it. Fox distributed. By the end of the original trilogy, Lucas had spent $70 million of his own money making sequels. He made it all back from merchandising before the films even released. The toy sales were staggering. 1977 to 1985, Kenner sold over 300 million action figures. Billions in total merchandise. Lunchboxes, bed sheets, Halloween costumes, breakfast cereal. Everything. Lucas got a cut of all of it. His contract said 100% of merchandising in perpetuity. Fox executives realized their mistake by 1980. They tried to renegotiate. Lucas said no. You gave me the rights. I'm keeping them. Fox couldn't do anything. The contract was ironclad. Their lawyer had written no material risk. That phrase cost them $12 billion. Alan Ladd Jr., the executive who approved the deal, left Fox in 1979. He saw Star Wars become a phenomenon but missed the merchandising explosion. Later in interviews he said, "We were idiots. George asked for toys and we laughed. We thought we were getting a cheap director. We gave away a gold mine. But here's the twist. Lucas got rich but also trapped. By the mid-80s, he was exhausted. He directed 1 Star Wars film and produced 2 more. He was done. He wanted to make other things. Experimental films. Small projects. But Star Wars wouldn't let him go. Fans demanded more. Studios wanted sequels. Toy companies needed new products. Lucas stepped back. Didn't direct for 22 years. Then in 1999 he returned. The Phantom Menace. The first Star Wars prequel. It was terrible. Critics hated it. Fans were furious. Jar Binks became the most despised character in film history. The actor Ahmed Best received death threats, considered suicide. Lucas was criticized for ruining his own legacy. And yet, The Phantom Menace made $1 billion at the box office and $3 billion in merchandise. Jar Binks, the character everyone hated, sold $500 million in toys. Kids loved him. Parents bought the products. Lucas learned a lesson. He said it in interviews, "I make movies for 12-year-olds. Adults can complain. Kids buy toys." He made 2 more prequels. Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith. Both were criticized. Both made billions. The prequel trilogy box office, $2.5 billion. Merchandising, $8 billion. Lucas proved something cynical. Quality doesn't matter if you own the IP. By 2012, Lucas was 68 years old. He'd been working on Star Wars for 39 years. He was worth over $5 billion, almost all from toys and licensing. And he was miserable. Fans hated him. He couldn't make anything else without Star Wars overshadowing it. He wanted out. Disney approached him. Bob Iger offered $3 billion for Lucasfilm. Everything. The films, the characters, the merchandising, theme park rights. Lucas countered at $5 billion. They negotiated, settled at $4.05 billion. Half cash, half Disney stock. Lucas took the deal. Announced he'd donate most of the money to education. Said he wanted to make experimental films. Small art projects. The things he'd always wanted to do. Star Wars was Disney's problem now, but there was a hidden cost. The contract included a clause. Lucas couldn't publicly criticize Disney's Star Wars films. Disney wanted his blessing, or at least his silence. For a few years, he stayed quiet. Then, in 2015, after seeing The Force Awakens, he gave an interview. Called Disney White Slavers Who Took His Creation. The clip went viral. Disney stopped inviting him to premieres. He never made the experimental films, hasn't directed anything since 2005. Instead, he built museums, donated $4 billion to USC and the University of Chicago, funded education initiatives. The man who made $12 billion from toys gave it all away and disappeared. Here's the part that breaks your brain. If Lucas had kept Lucasfilm, merchandising alone would have made him another $10 billion by now. Disney has generated $12 billion in Star Wars merchandise since 2012, plus $6 billion box office from the sequels, plus $6 billion box office from the sequels, plus Disney Plus revenue. The Mandalorian alone is worth billions. Lucas sold for $4 billion when waiting 10 more years would have made him $15 billion. He left $11 billion on the table. Why? He was tired. The fans broke him. The prequels were supposed to be his vindication. Instead, they made him the most hated man in sci-fi. He'd rather be poor and free than rich and trapped. Except he's not poor. He's worth $6 billion. The Disney stock he got in the deal doubled. He can't spend it fast enough. He tried giving it to charity. Still has billions left. The man who traded $350,000 for toy rights became so rich, he can't escape the money. The Fox executives who laughed at him? Most of them retired before realizing what they'd lost. The ones who stayed got promoted because Star Wars was a hit. By the time merchandising numbers came in, they'd moved to other studios. Nobody got fired for the worst business decision in Hollywood history because it looked smart for the first 3 years. The lesson Hollywood learned wasn't be generous with directors. It was own the IP at all costs. After Star Wars, studios never gave up merchandising again. Marvel negotiated fiercely for toy rights. Disney built their empire on it. Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, every franchise guards merchandising like nuclear codes. Lucas accidentally taught Hollywood that toys are more valuable than films. The 4-inch action figures Kenner sold for $2 in 1978, mint in package, they sell for thousands today. A Boba Fett prototype that never made it to production sold for $185,000 in 2019. Toys that cost pennies to make are worth more than cars. And the early bird certificate? The empty box that made parents furious in 1977? It's a holy grail for collectors. The box that contained nothing is now worth more than the toys it promised. The most Star Wars thing imaginable. The absence is more valuable than the presence. George Lucas didn't set out to change entertainment. He set out to protect himself. He'd been screwed once and wouldn't let it happen again. He took merchandising rights because he wanted control, not because he predicted billions. Fox gave them to him because every data point in history said sci-fi toys failed. Both sides made the deal for the wrong reasons. Then Star Wars succeeded beyond anyone's imagination. Lucas became a billionaire by accident. Fox lost $12 billion by being logical. The greatest business decision in film history was a paranoid director meeting incompetent executives at exactly the right moment. If Lucas had believed in Star Wars, he would have demanded more upfront. If Fox had believed in Star Wars, they never would have given him the rights. The deal only happened because everyone thought it would fail. The fortune only happened because everyone was wrong. Lucas made $12 billion from a movie he thought would bomb. Fox lost $12 billion on a deal they thought was genius. The executive who approved it left before the windfall. The director who negotiated it eventually sold because he couldn't stand the success. Everyone involved either left too early or stayed too long. The toys outlasted the movies. The merchandise outlasted the director. Star Wars became bigger than Lucas, bigger than Fox, bigger than cinema. It became a religion funded by plastic. 47 years later, kids who weren't born when Lucas sold to Disney play with lightsabers and Millennium Falcons. The toy rights he traded $350,000 for have generated over $30 billion across all eras. And somewhere in California, a 79-year-old man who gave away most of his fortune sits in a mansion he doesn't need, thinking about the experimental films he never made, the fans who never forgave him, and the toys that made him richer than he ever wanted to be. He traded his director's salary for the rights to cheap plastic. The plastic made him a billionaire. The billions made him miserable. He gave the billions away and still has billions left. The man who wanted control discovered that infinite money is its own prison. The greatest irony, if Star Wars had flopped like everyone predicted, Lucas would have kept the merchandising rights to nothing. Fox would have lost nothing. He'd have made his $150,000, moved on, made weird art films, lived happily. But because it succeeded, he got trapped in an empire he couldn't escape until he was almost 70. Success ruined him more than failure ever could have. The toys he took instead of money bought him everything except the thing he wanted most. Freedom to make something else. By the time he sold and got that freedom, he was too old and too tired to use it. Fox executives saved $350,000 on a director's salary, lost $12 billion on toys they thought were worthless, got promoted because the movie was a hit, retired before anyone asked about the merchandising clause, died thinking they were smart. George Lucas gave up $350,000 to own toys, made $12 billion, gave most of it away, stopped making movies at 40, came back at 55, made 3 more films everyone hated, sold everything at 68, never made another film. The studio that laughed at him doesn't exist anymore. Fox was bought by Disney in 2019. Disney now owns both Star Wars and the studio that gave it away. The circle is complete, and the early bird certificate, the empty box from Christmas 1977, sits in collector's cases worth $500. A cardboard promise that disappointed millions of children is now a treasure. The toy that didn't exist is worth more than the toys that did. George Lucas traded his salary for a toy. The toy became an empire. The empire became a prison. The prison sold for $4 billion. The $4 billion became museums and scholarships. The man who wanted to make experimental films about human imagination instead made $12 billion selling plastic to children. He got everything he asked for and nothing he wanted. The